Okay, Mayor Hancock, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Always good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. We talked about doing this sit-down interview, and I thought, why not just open this up to our viewers? We put it on Facebook and let people ask the questions. What do they want to know from you? We got a lot of responses, like right off the bat. I'm going to let you guess. What do you think the number one thing was that people want to ask you about?
How hot was the Denver Bronco mascot uniform when I wore it?
But that's a good
All
one.
right. Probably housing.
Yeah, the number one question.
Growth. Yeah, sure.
Affordability. That was just
Absolutely.
the biggest issue. So I'm going to start with the viewer questions. Jessica, she wrote, part of her question was, the raise in the rental market, definitely. It's frustrating to be a native who will be eventually pushed out due to the rise in rent, but not in pay.
Right. I think two things. One, affordable housing is the top priority for us. And here at the city, I've directed every department who has anything to do with housing to work as hard as we can in coordination and with our stakeholders external to the city to try to provide as much affordable housing as we can. We have produced over 1,900 units in the city of Denver over the last 3 years with our kind of stepped up sense of urgency and try to develop it. Our stakeholders are stepping up. These are the outside nonprofit and private sector companies that are building housing, and they recognize the importance of making sure our workers have housing. So it is a top priority for us. The second thing with regards to stagnated wages, I got to tell you, I don't think anything threatens our global competitiveness. I'm talking about our nation than the concentration of wealth and stagnation of wages in this country. And certainly here in Denver, Colorado. And it's one of the things that when I talk to the private sector, it's one of the things I talk about a lot. So we got to take care of people. We got to take care of our workers, and we got to make sure that they're able to provide for their families, quite frankly. We've got way too many people, over 50%, who are paying more than 50% of their wages, take-home wages, for housing. And so with the combination of the two, we've got, quite frankly, a pending challenge in our economy and in our city.
It relates to a question that Cindy Sinton asks, where she says rent has almost doubled, wages have not. She says it's very sad and irritating. Are there efforts to raise wages in Denver? How do we do that?
There are several efforts afoot right now. I know there are several groups out there that are pushing for increase in minimum wage. There are several people who are raising the flag saying it's time for us to look at stagnated wages, and certainly we're listening. I do support raising the minimum wage. We need to have a very thoughtful conversation in Colorado about what that is so that we not only don't overburden businesses, but we also do it in a way that is helpful for the worker. And so we need to know what that number is and understand what will actually propel greater productivity, as well as for people to be a little more, have a little more cushion, if you will, when it comes to meeting their personal needs.
How soon could that happen? Would that
It's
be
happening
ballot?
now. It is happening now, and I think some groups are going to put it on the ballot. Again, as I've expressed to them, I support increasing minimum wage. I support a thoughtful plan to increase stagnated wages. The reality is we want to make sure it's the right number.
Because it could burden businesses, like you mentioned, if it's too high.
Right, it could burden businesses, but also we don't want to have this conversation again. Well, what's the plan to continue to move them forward as this economy continues to change the way we live and the cost of living in Denver? I can't express the other side of that equation strongly enough. We need to make sure it's the right number so workers are getting the right number to better take care of their families.
You've lived in Denver for a long time, grew up here. Do you think Denver's getting too expensive?
Yeah, Denver's getting too expensive. It is time for us to recognize the fact that we're growing. We are a city that is no longer the city that nobody really talks about. People are talking about Denver all over the country. I go outside of this country, people are talking about Denver. It's a destination now. Parents are telling their kids, if I was graduating from college today, the first place I'd look would be Denver, Colorado. This is the place to be all over the country. You don't fight that. You embrace it. And you try to adjust so that we can accommodate those who are wanting to move here. We make the proper investments, but we also make sure that we have practical, realistic economics going forward, which means you've got to make sure people are properly compensated for the work they're being asked to do, and that we have on the side of housing and mobility sensible strategies to accommodate people.
Right. Barbara Feller-Evans has a very thoughtful question as it relates to affordability. She says, where are all the affordable houses for seniors and the ones on Social Security? Waiting lists are a year or two. She says that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we look at affordable housing issues and the metrics that really guide it, the issue of seniors is really one of the first to jump out at you. I mean, my mother lives in Denver, and She is challenged just like most seniors in the city of Denver. The reality is that that's one of the areas we're really focused on. So what you're seeing us do is work through the Office of Human Rights and Community Relations to survey really the need of our seniors in this city so that we can properly incorporate them in our strategies around affordable housing. It is a critical need. We know it is. We need to know the extent of the need for seniors needing affordable housing.
Would that include building more affordable housing specifically for seniors?
Absolutely, and working with those, there are some groups that build specifically for seniors, and as a city, we have helped fund some of those, principally in areas like Dahlia. We're looking at Holly as a potential area where we can build more senior. We've done it in the far northeast as well, and in southeast Denver, where we have invested in housing for seniors. We've just completed a study in 2015 where we know where seniors live. We can tell you what % of every neighborhood now has seniors and what needs they have. Now we need to know the extent of those who are in critical need of housing.
And Barbara brings up that point of waiting lists being a year or two. What can you do about that? Is that an issue with the Department of Human Services? Because we're hearing this not just from seniors, but from a lot of people with affordable housing, waiting a year to get into a house or more.
Yeah, one of the things, Toronto, we are challenged with, we don't build housing as a city of Denver. What we do is help fund some of the housing. We also help try to spur our partners to do more affordable housing through incentives and partnerships. There's not much we can do in terms of the waiting list because, across the spectrum, housing is limited, particularly affordable housing. And so we're doing what we can to kind of spur, incentivize housing in the city of Denver, affordable housing, particularly for seniors and families where the greatest need, and workforce housing, where we're finding our greatest need for housing. So it's not much we can do, or I can do as mayor, other than to continue to incentivize as much of the inventory that's being built today to be dedicated to families and particularly affordable housing for everyone.
I want to read you this question, then related to something that I've observed. Shawnee says, so much housing development being built everywhere, but yet landlords are raising rent or selling their homes at a drop and forcing families to move abruptly. This makes me think of 5 Points.
Yeah.
5 Points has changed so much just in the 10 years or so that I've been here, from an area that maybe wasn't as desirable, but provided an affordable place for people to live. Now it's the hot place, and it's getting really expensive, and those buildings that people could afford to rent from their landlords are being sold. They're being pushed out. Yeah. How do you feel about that, and what can we do about this?
On one hand, it's hard to challenge a landlord who's trying to take advantage of the marketplace. On the other hand, it's about compassion and recognizing that we have to have housing opportunities for everyone in this city. 5 Points, interestingly enough, you mentioned 5 Points, has probably the greatest mix of affordability and market rates than most neighborhoods in the city of Denver. We have seen several hundred new units come online in 5 Points, brand new units. A lot of it is affordable because we have been involved, been in the mix of the financing of a lot of these deals in 5 Points community. But you're exactly right. People have been in their homes and all of a sudden landlords are saying we're not renewing your lease unless you're ready to pay the exponentially increased rents, or we're cutting your lease short and we're buying you out and we're going to the market rates. It's a difficult challenge. It's one that makes me cringe every time I see it in the news. But again, it's that kind of bittersweet thing. Landlords taking advantage of the marketplace. We've got to make sure we have the inventory come on board. We just can't do it fast enough.
Can you punish a landlord who does that?
Not really. The city does not have oversight of housing and housing policies. It's really on the state level. There's not much punishment. That they have a right to rent to who they want to and to manage their properties as they wish. But it is an issue of compassion. I can tell you that working with regional mayors, we came together and we cobbled up some money where we were actually incentivizing landlords to keep people who are at the affordable rates, and maybe we can help cushion it a little bit. We've done some of those things, but it's little, and we know it's like giving a well a tic-tac. We have a lot of work to do throughout the regions, not just Denver, but throughout the metro region, to make housing accessible to all people who want to live in the area.
The need is great. I want to switch to another topic that Tim emailed us this question saying, road conditions are horrible and short-term paving and overall layout is unsafe. What are the mayor's plans to not only improve roadway conditions, but also improve the safety to pedestrians and bicyclists? So we're talking about the cars driving on it as well as the bikes and the people.
Well, Tom's asking a great question. One is the city of Denver in 2007 passed a new mill that allows us to pave more roads than we have been paving in the past. So every year we're paving an additional 300 miles of lane miles is what we call them here in the city of Denver. to help with our road conditions. Secondly, this is the time of year where we notice the worst conditions of our road because of the snow and the ice that have expanded the cracks. Now they're potholes, and the teams are out there trying to patch as quickly as possible. Here's the reality. The city of Denver is doing everything we can to patch roads and to repave roads, and we are trying to catch up as much as we can. We have a grading process. I think about 75% of our roads today pass, but we always notice those that don't, right? But the reality is that we've got crews out there. We have contract crews as well as our city crews trying to do everything we can to keep our roads together. It's a very expensive prospect, but the reality is that we're going to do everything we can to make sure they're safe. Finally, I'll say this. We have what we call complete streets in Denver, and the ideal is to make our roads more multimodal so that bicyclists can enjoy the roads, pedestrians can get about the city. And as much as we can, we're going to continue to pave or to stripe the roads so that bicyclists have safe lanes in which to ride, and pedestrians, every time we can, we're expanding sidewalks so people feel incentivized to walk. But this is a city in transformation. We're much more of becoming a more multimodal city as opposed to a auto committed city. And as we transition, we're all going to go through the changes, and it's going to take a while to get there. But I promise you, this culture is shifting right now.
Just one of the little growing pains. Let me know when you get to Broadway and I-25. The potholes there. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Okay, switching topics again.
Yeah.
Deb, she emailed a nice question too. I'm just wanting to know about homeless solutions for Denver. And a lot of people, this has been on their minds since we saw the ordinance on the sidewalk clearing, wondering where people are going, and homeless people and advocates saying there are not enough beds here for you to be pushing people off the streets. So what kind of efforts are there to create real lasting solutions to homelessness?
The city of Denver commits almost $50 million a year to homelessness. Taronda, we work, and we as a city are really trying to address the spectrum of homelessness. Not just the fact that you need shelter, although housing first is very, very important. But a lot of folks on our street, anywhere from 40 to 60% are suffering from some form of behavioral health challenge, whether it's mental or drug and alcohol addictions. And so we have, I opened up the first ever Office of Behavioral Health to begin to direct resources and services to individuals who are suffering from those elements. We no longer have the mental health hospitals that we grew up used to. And so cities are bearing the greatest burden today with those who are suffering from the mental health. What you see on the streets today are more of your chronically homeless who are suffering from a lot of those behavioral health challenges, and we're doing everything we can to support them. We didn't clear the streets, the sidewalks, until we knew there were enough shelter beds available. There have been a number of those individuals since we cleared the sidewalks who've moved on to transitional housing. There are some who've sought behavioral health, and so we are beginning to help them. Some have gone to the Lawrence Street Center, where we as a city invested millions to help build so they can queue with dignity, get showers, wash their clothes, and have clean restrooms to use. And so we continue to make the investments, and so we are following a master plan which calls for a comprehensive approach to homelessness, and not just get a roof over their head, because if we keep doing that, that cycle will keep repeating itself of going from street to jail, jail to the street, back to mental health, or to the hospital or to drug and alcohol rehab. It doesn't work. We're spending a lot of money on that cycle that has not proven effective.
But if there are enough beds, why do we still see people on the streets, and why are we still being told by people who are on the streets that there are not enough beds?
It's their preference in terms of the type of beds they're looking for. We have shelter beds. Some will say, I don't want to go in there, it's unsafe, I don't want to go in there. They have bed bugs, which, by the way, we're inspecting, and it's shown it's not there. We understand there are challenges with shelters, but it's much more humane, safer, healthier for you to be indoors as opposed to sleeping on the sidewalks. And we're talking not just for those who are homeless, but the entire community. And so we have to step back and take a broader view. People need to pass the sidewalks. We need to make sure that we don't have unsafe conditions on the sidewalks. People with, we found excrement on sidewalks. It's important for us to make sure there's a healthy environment for everyone. And we didn't move folks just to shoo them away. We moved them to get into healthier, safer, more sanitary conditions.
Okay. Like much of the country, we've over the past year or so seen protests that involve the police, excessive force allegations. There are people here locally upset over the death of Michael Marshall, who died in police custody. You faced a lot of public criticism over that. I'm thinking particularly at the MLK parade.
Yeah.
I was there
Yeah.
with my family.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, first of all, how did you feel
Sure.
when you heard and saw that? Because that was a really loud outcry that was directed at you.
Yeah, interestingly enough, when I heard the Black Lives Matter group, on one hand, I really felt for those of us who back in the day made it possible for us all to be able to march in peace and under the values and principles of Dr. King. It took me back to sleeping outside of the state permit office in the middle of a snowstorm because we were queuing to make sure that we wouldn't have counter protests, to the Martin Luther King parade. And you might recall when we had the big counter protests and it turned bloody, many of us would queue for over a week. And I slept out in the middle of a snowstorm to make sure. It took me back to those individuals who believed in the values and ideas of Dr. King and said, you know what, this should be a march for everyone. So I was a little concerned about, blemishing Colorado's reputation as really honoring Dr. King. And then I listened to really what they were asking about: affordable housing, jobs, addressing the issue of homelessness, really the stuff that takes up 80% of what I do every day. The fact that the city is committing $50 million toward homelessness on an annual basis, the fact that no mayor has ever committed as much to affordable housing as I have, who has built up and helped bring more jobs to the city, over 40,000 jobs and over 3,200 companies to the city over the last 5 years, just to get this economy moving. We don't disagree with what Black Lives Matter and many of those people who are talking about racial justice and relations with the police department. But this is an administration that's leaning in. We're not afraid. We have demonstrated the courage to say, let's address it. No matter what kind of criticism we face, let's address it, because we love this city. And I'm not going to leave it worse than what I found it. And I truly believe in making sure those things happen. I just think it's unfortunate that they chose Dr. King's holiday when we all came together to celebrate the ideas that brought us to this point. And but we're on those issues.
Are you going to be working with them or speaking with them?
We have reached out to them, and we have tried to meet with them and say, hey, listen, we're there. We're not far. We're better off and more effective working together than to kind of with an antagonistic relationship. We can do better than that. It's not how we operate. I hear you. Typically, I'd probably be right there with you. If I wasn't mayor of the city, I have been in the civil rights movement, have run a civil rights organization. I get the issues you're talking about. But we have not been able to figure out how we sit down together and have the conversation. Several of them have come back and have said, hey, listen, I'm sorry it went down the way it did. But we want to work with you on these issues, and I appreciate that, and we'll keep pushing.
So part of what they've been talking about, like we said, police relations. One viewer just had this really blunt Facebook question. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yep.
Robbie asked, I'd like to know why the bar is set so low in Denver to become a police officer.
There is probably not a more challenging. If you look at the process of becoming a police officer in Denver, there is not a low bar. We weed out more than we accept into the academy. There are a lot of things that automatically disqualify someone. But I can tell you that in 2011, I was the only candidate that came in saying, I'm changing the police department. I'm changing the leadership, and we're going to raise up really the bar of leadership within the police department. We've done just that. I think Chief White has come in and done a tremendous job. He's tapped in really what I saw, the untapped talent of the police department. We have a whole new set of new leaders of the police department. I think the men and women of the police department have really said, hey, listen, we want a department that we can all be proud of and our community can be proud of. For the most part, while mistakes have been made, this is a police department that, when you look at it, has over 500,000 contacts with the public. Almost less than 1% complaints from those individuals. This is a police department we can be proud of. Must we address the mistakes that occur? Absolutely, we must address, and we should never tolerate excessive force in the line of duty, and we won't. And Chief White has a directive to address it. I believe the manager of safety is ready to address it when it occurs, and we have. And if you look at how we've addressed the sheriff's department and police department, we have dismissed officers. We've dismissed sheriffs. I haven't looked at the number, but I don't think, we don't want to make a habit of firing folks, but we're not at all immune from saying, you don't belong here. And until we have the people, until you're willing and ready to interact with the public in a very credible and respectful manner, you won't be here. But for the most part, most of our officers do, and our numbers show it.
So that's the structural disciplinary side. What about the community side? What kind of programs are you doing to outreach with the police department and the criminal justice system?
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Listen, I'm not immune from understanding the fact that there have been challenging relationships between the communities of color and the police department. I mean, we've got to be willing to address them. We've got to be willing to have the conversations. When the issues really started, ramping up here in Denver, one of the things I did was I got out and talked to people. I held little, focus groups with students of color, with students of all races, with seniors, with community members, professionals. And we had some great, impactful conversations for me in particular. One young person said to me, if the only time I interact with the police department is when they're correcting my behavior, then guess what? That's the relationship we're going to have.
It's a negative interaction.
You're a parent, I'm a parent. If the only time I talk to my kid is when I'm correcting behavior, that's not going to be a good, healthy relationship. And so one of the things that we did, we came in and we created this Race and Justice mini grant challenge. And I said, I want to put some money aside. I want to pilot this year. I want the community to drive their conversations and relationship building with the police. Because what we heard, Toronto, is the media will have us believe that this is combative relationship that will never, everyone hates the police. In reality, in all these focus groups that included races of, Latino, African American, Asian, the GLBT community, professionals, they were like, we respect the police. We believe they respect us. We need the line of communication continue to make this relationship healthier. And so these mini grants are built on from community-driven process to say, we want to engage you in better relationship building. And we gave them the resources to help them do that, and we had tremendous response across the city. We just issued the first set of mini grants, and people are going to be doing events between now and the end of the summer, and we'll go back and evaluate it, and my goal is to make it even bigger next year.
I've heard about a program that kind of falls in line with that too, with guidance, My Brother's Keeper, part of a national program. What's Denver doing?
Oh, Denver is one of the leading cities now in My Brother's Keeper. We really embraced the president's initiative to really reach out to young men of color and to say, we've got to make sure that this road gets smoother for you going forward. We held our most recent conference, the second annual conference. We've done two things. The conference where we had, over 250 young boys of color in the room. It's one of the most rewarding days I've ever spent in this office, spending time with them where I sat in a circle and really talked to them about challenges and opportunities, how to overcome them. Recognizing that it wasn't about 20 years ago I was sitting in your seat and concerned about my future, really trying to just make it to 25 years old, because that was the point where they said today young men of color have greater chance of having an out-of-body experience than to live to be the age of 25 because of all the violence that was being perpetrated. I remember celebrating 25 more than I did 21 because of that, saying I made it. And that's not the way anybody should be living, right? And so I was able to share kind of those thoughts that I've come from these streets, I get it. And what were some of the things that helped me get over? And so Denver, we've had 2 successful conferences, and now we're mentoring, we're matching up young people with mentoring. And then secondly, we recognize we didn't have to reinvent the wheel to do My Brother's Keeper initiative. There are organizations throughout the city, whether it's Reverend Leon Kelly's Open Door initiative, or it's Narcy Jackson's Athletes to Man initiative out in the far northeast. There are groups who are already working every day to reach these young men and to make sure that they're not too heavy to carry. And they're doing it, and so we celebrated them in an awards program where we gave them awards, and simply on behalf of the My Brother's Keeper initiative, thank you for being My Brother's Keeper.
Nice. I recently did a story, like maybe a week and a half ago, about homeowners who preserved a row of 15 historic homes on Lincoln Street, all designated as landmarks. That was pretty big for them. So this leads to a next Facebook question that comes from Lynette. She asks about historical preservation. Please, she says, they're tearing down what's left of the rich Denver history. How do you balance that history with a burst of population growth?
Yeah, we have the systems in place to protect our historic buildings. It mirrors what happens on the state and ultimately what happens on the federal level. And we have to be sensitive to preserving our historic heritage, and what each facility or building, what story they tell, obviously is very important. But it comes starting from the community to say, we've done the research, here's the historic significance of this building or this house, and we need to preserve it. And the system works to move quickly, if we can, as swiftly as we can, to protect it and to certainly make sure, get in front of a demolition. But we have to balance that, of course, with property rights of individuals, right? And when I was on city council, we saw quite a bit of those, where there were some hostile designation efforts. And I think we have the policies now in place to kind of help create that balance. And it's an ongoing effort that never ends. But there is a process in place in Denver to preserve our historic buildings.
Mayor Hancock, thank you so much for answering these questions.
My pleasure.
Questions from our viewers. We really appreciate it. You know, Denver's a city that's growing, so
Yeah.
we'll continue to be excited to see where we go next.
Thank you, Taronda. Glad to be with you.